our vice chair, Tom Reed, as our new incoming chair of the finance committee. I need a motion.
Move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this item? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations, Tom, as new chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, now we have to pick a vice chair. Do I have a nomination from the floor who would like to be the vice chair of the finance committee? Anybody? Matt?
Is the chair interested in that position? Or you
No,
need to
no,
step
no.
down completely?
I'm gonna be an
Yep.
alternate. Thank you.
Yep. I'll nominate Commissioner Hazelden as vice chair.
I'll second that.
All right, I think we got a motion and a second on the floor, which is amazing, that's awesome. And is there any other discussion on this item? All right, with that, I'll entertain, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Vice Chair. All right, with that, I am passing over the gavel to the new chair. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for all you've done for PSTA and the chair of the finance committee. So I certainly have big shoes to fill, and I look forward to doing my best. Thank you for your vote of confidence. I appreciate that.
Oh, you turn the page.
Now turn the
I
page.
should have turned it forward.
Hey, come on, you don't know, you don't think I know how to turn the page?
Sorry about that.
Okay, next up is item 3B, the approval of the November 2024 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Transit Infrastructure Concrete Construction Project. BJ Gavin, PSTA's Manager of Capital Programs, will present our first action item, which is the approval of a new contract for concrete installation for bus shelters and other amenities around the county. BJ?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So before we get into the transit infrastructure construction contract, this is the new year, and so I just want to go over real quickly the role of the Finance Committee for those new board members we have and refresher for the mainstays. So the role of the Finance Committee is to recommend approval to the full board. So today's committee approval, if this item is approved, if these other items are approved, is a committee's recommendation to the board, then to be voted on by the board. So all committee items go to the board for approval. That's the main text of this. So now we'll get into the transit infrastructure construction contract. So the action here is to recommend approval of a 2-year contract with 3 one-year options with American Construction Services Incorporated of Tampa for transit infrastructure construction for a total contract amount not to exceed $1.5 million, and authorize the CEO to exercise the 3 one-year options. Every PSTA rider starts and ends their journey at a PSTA bus stop. These stops are not just physical locations, but critical points of contact between PSTA and our riders. They shape the rider's experience, making them feel safe, valued, connected to our transportation network. However, bus stop work is always ongoing, especially as we strive to maintain ADA compliance through our service area, support existing ridership, and expand into new opportunities in Pinellas County. I'm BJ Gavin, your Manager of Capital Programs. Here's the finished product, the after photo of one of our newly constructed stops. The next photo I'm going to show you is the before photo, which is the start of this construction process. And then I'll share the beginning to end, kind of the steps and the concrete being put in. And during that time, I'll talk a little bit more about the importance of this contract. So that's the beginning. So delivering high-quality transit infrastructure requires a dependable construction partner. Although the process starts with shelter deployment, planning, and site engineering, construction is the final and most visible step. That is the contract we're asking for your approval on today. Approval of this transit infrastructure construction contract will allow PSDA to continue on with critical boarding pads, essential facility improvements, and improvements to operational locations. All of the items hinge on our bus stop contract. This allows us to execute operational efficiency and maintain associated project timelines as well. And this progress gets us from start to finish. So David Hensler, PSDA's Interim Director of Procurement, will brief you on the details of this procurement.
Yes. So good morning. We released an invitation for bid. We received approximately 10 submissions in progress, which means there was a fair bit of interest. But we ultimately got 2 bids from American Construction Services Incorporated of Tampa and Flores Construction Company. They were both found responsive, and you'll see on the action item the pricing chart. And now you might ask the question, well, BJ just said 1.5 million. This chart only shows a little under 200,000. What's going on here? The way we set up our pricing schedule was an estimated quantity of 1 for each work item. So that way we could get a true apples to apples comparison on their bid price. But those quantities are estimated. We do have the ability to order all the way up to the 1.5 million worth of work over the 5-year contract. So we've done a responsibility check. American Construction Services Incorporated of Tampa is responsible and has the capacity to perform the work and are therefore eligible for award. And I'm open to any questions you might have about the procurement process.
I have a real quick one. The 1.5 million, is that inclusive of the 3 one-year options? I never can remember how that.
Yes, it would be for the full 5-year term.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, thank you.
Sure.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I do.
Max?
When we do this, do we give, I'm just looking at American Construction Services of Tampa, do we give more weight to Pinellas County companies? Do we make an effort to try to keep it in the county?
That is a really good question. So the way that the procurement process is set up, you can't use geographical preference in any of our solicitations with the exception of A&E services, architectural and engineering. So we can't prevent anyone from out of state from bidding on it. But given the sort of the relative dollar value of this contract, it's highly unlikely that anyone outside of Pinellas, Pasco, or Hillsborough would even really have an interest in it. But we did really target this to Pinellas and Hillsborough contractors. So we got the contractors that are under contract with Hart currently. So we know that they work in this area and that they do transit construction. And we included them on our mailing list. And actually, American Construction Services Incorporated of Tampa is a current Hart vendor as well. So to answer your question, we can't tailor it to the local economy, but we do that. We do our best to make sure that they're aware of it.
Thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
It did, thank you.
I think that was a good question. Are there any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So, just to break it down, if I understand, we're talking about 5 years, and this would amount to roughly 9 shelters?
No, it depends on the cost of the sites themselves. So the number of projects we could do isn't defined. That is going to depend on where we're putting in infrastructure, the site conditions. The cost of a site for construction can range, and this contract would cover the very small if we would need what I call heavy repairs. Heavy repairs would be like concrete work if we have broken sidewalks or boarding and lighting pads within our defined areas. That could be $1,000. We also go all the way up for it could be a transit stop that accepts multiple routes. That could be in the tens of thousands of dollars if it's an established design. If we're designing it to improve that from 2 shelters to 4 shelters, we could need some additional infrastructure. So it would depend on the engineer's design.
What does the 178 represent?
So we wanted to make sure that we were comparing apples to apples.
Right.
And so we said, well, what are all the possibilities that we could construct at a location? Some locations, for example, don't have handrails. We don't need them. But other locations, there's an elevation change, so we might need a handrail helping people down. So we wanted to make sure to get a cost for handrails. So we prescribed in the invitation for bid, which is
Right.
which dollar amounts we needed them to report on. We're asking any contractor, but it turned out to be these two. Contractor A, what are you going to charge for this? Contractor B, what are you going to charge for this? So we wanted to list all those items out.
Can I take a shot at this, BJ?
Yeah.
So we have a very long pricing list in our invitation for bid that has work items, individual work items. So to BJ's point, a handrail, bollard, concrete construction, repair of this. So we
Right.
had, it was about 60 items that we had on this pricing list, and we asked them to price each one of those. And when you roll up that pricing that they provided, that's how we arrive at this total dollar value.
So if you had the need for every one of those items
Yeah.
on a particular project, it would be 178.
Over the full 5 years. This is the full 5 years of every item that we had listed. So obviously, we're gonna spend a lot more than the 178 or the 192,000, but to BJ's
I'd
original
just like to
point-
see us get as many shelters as possible.
Oh,
That's-
absolutely.
that's my
I
only-
trust me, BJ wants to build as many as he can.
Do you have any idea of the projected number that this contract may produce?
I wouldn't have that, BJ might have that.
So yeah, so I can tell you, we can make some assumptions. So a typical bus stop can range from about $10,000 to $50,000. Now, that's not just putting a shelter in place. That's demo, that's getting rid of the land, that is improving just our area as far as sidewalk or boarding and lighting or shelter pad, or there could be, bench pad, shelter pad. If there's, like I said, if there's an elevation change, then it's the sidewalk down. So it all depends on site conditions. There's also, it's always amazing to me how much variation we can get. And you don't think that there's elevation change in Pinellas. We think we're pretty flat. But there are places where there's a 5-foot difference between just the roadway and the sidewalk itself. So that could mean a retaining wall. So all of these things are what we are that we want to get pricing on. But that $10,000 to $50,000 range, that doesn't include one of our largest stops. I would say that we have 5 to 10 of a much larger kind of stop in the county where we have multiple bus routes. A good example would be Countryside Mall. So we have 5 or 6 routes coming in there at one time. That would be a site, if it needed improvement, it doesn't. But if it did, that would be a much more costly endeavor to have improvements all along the sidewalk along that roadway. But you are speaking my language with getting as many shelters as we can, the most bang for our buck. That's what we're looking for. We want to install as many as we can, but also optimize that. We want to look at, well, where do we have the most people that we don't have a shelter, and where do we get the best cost out of serving those people. So this is just the construction. Before we get to construction, there's a process that we use to determine where we need to be looking at installing, and then what's the cost of that installation, and then engaging our engineers to say, here's what it will cost to engineer this, and then here's what it will cost to construct it.
And one last question on this. Is there another pot of money for maintenance of existing shelters? Or will maintenance come out of this?
There is, yeah. There's a different pot for maintenance, and when I say maintenance, I want to specify heavy maintenance. So our facilities department, or our facilities section within our maintenance department they are fantastic. And so they do all the maintenance they can. For example, a shelter itself, they would handle that maintenance. This is only if we need specialty construction, heavy maintenance. It'd be concrete, or if we need to fabricate a handrail, or if a retaining wall has given way at our sites. We don't have many retaining walls, but that's just kind of one of the outliers that we don't have specific expertise in within our group. So they've got their own pot.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
Commissioner Beasley, I know that you and I talked about having a presentation about the whole bus shelter program at PSTA.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're gonna
Yeah.
hopefully have
Well,
that next.
I know we all are. I'm very interested in, like today, to be able to get out of this weather.
Yeah.
Whether it's hot
Yeah.
weather, cold weather, just to try to help people get out of the weather and be able to be comfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, BJ. Do I have a motion to approve this contract?
I make a motion.
Second?
Second, okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is Chris Cochran, the PSTA Senior Project Manager, who will present the interlocal agreement with the City of St. Pete for the grant funding of the Pier Tram. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
It's the PM of the day.
Good morning, committee members. New chairman, congratulations. Brad. This morning, I am here to present to you an exciting opportunity that came out of a grant that PSTA was awarded in March of 2024. PSTA had applied for funding, and the federal government essentially lumped in funding for 2 projects into this into our grant award. And the first of them is for the Pier Tram project, which is essentially kind of an administrative opportunity partnership with the city to provide a pass-through of funding so that they could purchase a new electric vehicle tram for operation on the pier. And the remainder of the funding is for PSTA to expand our electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And that these projects are ongoing concurrently, and we'll come back and talk to you more about the electrical vehicle, electrical vehicle charging infrastructure at a later time. Today, we're going to specifically focus on the tram project here. And I think it's important up front here to make sure that you all understand that what we are looking to accomplish here with the recommendation is really the approval of some agreements to pass funding through to the city in essentially an administrative role to provide the funding for the tram so that they can accomplish their portion of the application that they applied for. So as part of this recommendation, this is made up of 3 agreements or three recommendations, all of which require authorization. We're recommending the authorization for our Chief Executive Officer to sign and approve an interlocal agreement with the City of St. Petersburg for the purchase of the tram vehicle that will operate on the pier, as well as a lease agreement that we will have with the city for the use of that electric tram. And additionally, the approval of the purchase of this electric tram from a company that we have identified through a general services contract. The company is called Gator Moto Utility Vehicles and More LLC. We have this vehicle was identified by the city. We've coordinated with them as well as the company to ensure that we will be able to help them in ensuring that this vehicle could be purchased in compliance with the requirements of the grant funding. So just a little more background on this. The total amount of the grant funding was a little over $1.1 million that was awarded. From that, $150,000 was allocated for the City of St. Petersburg, and the city has committed to putting up $50,000 of their own funding. The remaining $100,000 needed to purchase that vehicle will come out of the grant, so there's no additional funding coming directly out of PSTA's pocket here. And that is clearly spelled out in the interlocal agreement. That's one of the reasons for that agreement and the necessary administrative functions that we're recommending today. So again, I think the interlocal lease agreements is very important. We have coordinated closely between our general counsel, city's legal team, as well as staff to spell out the roles and responsibilities associated with the interlocal agreement and lease agreements. And want to make sure that you all know that all of the maintenance and operations responsibilities as well as liabilities associated with the use of the tram vehicle are passed on to the city. PSTA will have no role in maintaining the vehicle, and we will have no role in operating the vehicle. Because the funding comes from the grant, and this is an administrative function that requires the passing through of the funding, it will require approval by both our board, which is why we're coming to you with this recommendation, and the city council. And again, we have identified the vendor through a general services contract. I do want to let you know the contracts right now are being finalized. We are very, very close to being finalized with those contracts, and they will be completed in time for the board. And with that, our recommendation is to provide the chief executive officer to sign and approve the contracts with the city of St. Petersburg for this particular project, for the interlocal agreement with the city of St. Petersburg, for the purchase of the tram, as well as the lease agreement with the city for the use of the tram, and approval for the purchase of the tram vehicle from this particular vendor. With the understanding that the agreements will be finalized at the time of the board for them to review. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Supervisor Max.
Does this replace the existing tram up here?
I'm not 100% sure on where their useful life of their existing trams are. I know they've had a desire to put out electric trams on the pier. This will augment that service at the very least. The benefit of these trams is that they will be able to operate all day, which is what they were not able to do with the previous electric trams that they had out there. So,
Do we own the existing tram that's out there now? Okay.
Why don't they operate all day?
The existing electric trams, from what I understand, they don't, the technology that's on the electric trams that they have out there at this time just weren't able to operate all day, but technology has progressed significantly since that
Yeah,
time.
they're just unreliable, and so they use an older gas tram.
Yeah.
A lot.
Thank you, Brad, for clarifying that. The ones that operate all day are gas powered, and I guess they have a couple of smaller electric ones out there that are doing some other non-related kind of parallel stuff, so.
Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Oh.
I didn't see your hand.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Hey, just for my clarification, where does the money come from? Are these federal funds or?
This was, these were community project funding. It was the earmark funding that Kathy Castor had sponsored, and we were allocating
Federal. And then, I'm just curious, were there other options or, things we could use this for? And that's not intended to detract from this, but I'm just curious if.
So what we had applied for, we were awarded money for the electric vehicle, for the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. This portion of the funding, the feds saw both of these projects and they lumped them in together. So this has essentially always been kind of dedicated for the city's purpose. They just lumped all that money together. However, the city is not eligible for direct federal funding the same way we are, which is one of the reasons why we needed to assist them.
Got it. So in response to the grant application, basically, this was already earmarked
Yes, sir.
for this project? Okay.
Correct.
All right.
Theoretically, down the road, at the end of the useful life, or if somehow the city didn't want to give it up, we could take it back and use it in some way, maybe.
No, I was just curious. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Last quick question, Chris. Does this require individual approvals, or we gotta do one blanket approval for all three items?
We'd like to do one for all of them.
Any more questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Chris.
All right, thank you all very much.
Next up is Abhishek Dayal, the Director of Project Management, who will present our final action item, the Clearwater Transit Center Duke Utility Underground Interlocal Agreement. Try saying that fast. Abhishek, is this gonna be your last time before us?
Yes, I believe so.
Well, boo, we hate to hear that, but thank you. In my time on the planning committee on the finance, you always brought us nothing but concise, great information. So thank you and wish you best of luck in your next endeavor.
Thank you so much, and congratulations to you, Mr. Chair and
Thank you.
Vice Chair, for the committee of assignments. For the last time, I'm Abhishek Dayal, Director of Project Management, and this action item is one of the action items that I did talk about last month when we talked about the CSX agreement. This is an agreement with the City of Clearwater for the undergrounding of power lines that go adjacent to our site for the Clearwater Transit Center project. The recommendation is an approval of an interlocal agreement with the City of Clearwater for the purposes of undergrounding the Duke power lines along Myrtle Avenue. And the not to exceed agreement, the not to exceed amount is $400,000. All of those funds are programmed and budgeted in our current project budget, so we're not seeking any funding, additional funding. It's all already programmed in our budget. So just to give you a background on the Clearwater Transit Center, you've seen this slide a few times now, but this is a slide showing the current Park Street terminal, the aging 40-plus-year-old terminal, and the new site, which is located at the corner of Court Street and Myrtle, shown in the blue star. That's the new site. This was a great coordination and partnership with the City of Clearwater, where we were able to exchange our properties. The city got our Park Street terminal property, and we received the city's much bigger property to build this new terminal. That happened back in March of 2024. Speaking of the city, we've been continued coordination and communication with the city staff as we develop this important project. We are working with them on the City Hall project that's just across the street from us. It's under construction right now. So we're working with them very closely. We're also working with them on the public plaza design. This is the key corner per city's downtown development code. We have to build that as a plaza, a public plaza. So we're working with their staff to make sure we meet their downtown development code. And then finally, and this is the topic of this item today, the undergrounding of Duke power lines along Myrtle Avenue, and a little bit more about that. Before I get into that, this is the site plan. I've shown this before that shows the layout of our proposed facility. This will accommodate all our buses that we utilize at Park Street Terminal. We can accommodate those. It's also a multimodal facility, so we will incorporate rideshare connections, our PSTA access connections, bikes and pedestrians, and it makes it for a very easy flow into this facility. Now, the Myrtle Avenue is to the right, and if you've driven down Myrtle Avenue, you'll see really tall power lines owned by Duke all along Myrtle Avenue. So what the city is going to be doing is they'll be taking the lead in coordinating with Duke to underground those power lines. And this will not only improve the walkability on Myrtle Avenue, it'll also make it safer. Again, the sidewalk widths are pretty narrow over there. Once we underground all those lines, we'd be able to widen the sidewalk, making it for much safer walkability along that corridor. And also enhanced resiliency, particularly during the hurricanes. You can have more reliability on power, given that all the power lines would be buried underneath. PSTA and the city will share the cost proportionately, depending on how far we underground the lines. And that final cost will be determined based on the binding estimate that Duke provides. The city already has a binding estimate, but that might change depending on the design once it's completed. But again, we will share the cost with the city proportionately for this undergrounding effort. So right now, the city is looking at two options. Option one is undergrounding 4 city blocks along Myrtle Avenue. And we own the southernmost portion of the block, so we will essentially share 1/4 of the cost. If the city picks 3 block options, so that goes from Park Street to Court, since we own 1 block, we will essentially pay for 1/3 of the cost. So the city is still evaluating the 2 options, and based on that, we will partner with them to provide our share of the cost. Just going into the project schedule for the transit center, the design is expected to be completed by summer of this year. And then following that, we'll be starting construction by picking a contractor. And then the proposed operation is late 2026. Our team will be coordinating with Duke very extensively, depending on when they start their work, to make sure that we accommodate the design and the construction schedule with them, so that once they're up and running, they can work with us seamlessly on their portion of the undergrounding project. This is just a reminder. I showed this last time of the upcoming action items. So this is the first of those 4 items. The next one would be the construction agreement with CSX. As we work with them through the completion of the design, we'll have a construction agreement with them. There will be an artist agreement that will essentially help develop that key corner, the public plaza that I mentioned. And then finally, the contractor will be awarded to start the construction for this project late summer of this year. So again, the recommendation is an approval of an interlocal agreement with the city for a not-to-exceed amount of $400,000 for Duke undergrounding. And again, this is included in the project budget, so I'm not seeking any funding from our finance team. And it's essentially basically a cost-sharing arrangement with the city. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Abhishek. I do have a quick question. You mentioned that there's a binding price, but that it may change. Kind of seems a contradiction to each other. So can you explain in what circumstances would trigger a change in a binding price?
Yeah, and good question. So a couple of things that could change the binding estimate. One is the 2 options that I presented. So there's a 4-block option and a 3-block option.
Okay.
Obviously, the 4-block option will be a little more expensive than the 3-block option. So we will see, some cost differences between those 2. And then the second thing, and this is more of a minutia, is where they put their transformers, because those require placement of transformers. We obviously have some constraints on our site, so we'll probably be working with them on moving the location of their transformers. So that might change the binding estimate a little bit, depending on our design with them, with Duke.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
Quick question. When will we know if they pick option A or option B? Do we know that?
So the city is planning to take the chosen option to their council within the next month or so. So once this action is approved, we will send this to the city, and the city will take one of these options, the binding estimate for that option, and take both our agreement and the binding estimate to their council for approval. So that will essentially solidify the cost.
Thank you.
Good question.
Mr. Chair, yeah, and I think I talked to our attorney, who talked to the city of Clearwater's attorney yesterday, and I think they were planning on trying to get this to their first meeting in February, city council.
Okay.
Still, even though I think there's still some things that the city's trying to work out with Duke.
Yeah.
Before then.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve this?
Make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Abhishek.
Thank you.
Great job. We're gonna miss you.
Yes, we are. All right, that's all the action items today. So right now, we'll have Devin Deal, Planning and Data Analyst Manager, who will update us on ridership. Good morning.
Good morning, Finance Committee. Good morning, Chair Reed. Congratulations, Chair Reed and Vice Chair Hazelton.
Thank you.
My name is Devin Neal, the Planning and Data Analyst Manager. I'm going to be going over some ridership highlights from November 2024. But also, there has been some discussion at the board and interest in ensuring that PSTA is right-sizing our bus fleet and really making sure we look at, or wanting more information on the data we look at when deciding bus fleets and how we determine that. So I also dig into that in this presentation. So to start out with November ridership, this is our system total passenger trips for November. This is all of our mobility programs, our bus ridership and everything. So you have fiscal year 25 in red, fiscal year 24 in green, and fiscal year 23 in blue. You can see that to start out fiscal year 24 or 25 in October, we were slightly below fiscal year 24. That's because of Hurricane Milton. We shut down for several days of service in October. We did see our 3-year high in ridership in November, exceeding fiscal year 24 and 23 totals. Looking at just our bus fixed route ridership, we see the same trend, lower ridership in October due to the shutdown days from Hurricane Milton. And we also exceeded our previous 2-year total fixed route ridership in November. So I'm going to dig a little further now into our bus fleet, how many buses we have of each size, and some of the considerations that go into ensuring that we have the right size buses to best serve our customers in the county. So in the top left, you see a photo of one of our 40-foot electric buses. We don't only have electric buses in 40 feet. We have hybrid, diesel, and electric in 40 feet. Those typically have 38 seats, and we have 126 of those 40-foot buses in our fleet. In the top right, you see a photo of a 35-foot Gillig hybrid bus. We also have 35-foot buses in hybrid and diesel, and depending on the model, those range from 32 to 35 seats. In the bottom left, you see one of our 30-foot diesel buses. We have 3 of those, and those have about 26 seats. And then in the bottom right, you see, we call it a turtle top. It is a 25-foot vehicle with 12 seats, and we have 8 of those. We have a few other special dedicated vehicles. So we have 20 trolley buses that run on the Central Avenue trolley and the Suncoast Beach trolley. Those have about 28 seats. And we have 12 Sunrunner buses that are dedicated to the Sunrunner route. Those are 40-foot buses, and they have 23 seats, which that is lower than our typical 40-foot buses. However, these buses were designed to have much more standing capacity than a typical bus because, one, it allows you to bring those bicycles inside and really facilitate that fast boarding on the Sunrunner so you don't slow the bus down. And 2, these are typically shorter trips than you would see on a route like Route 52, where a rider could be on the bus for an hour and a half. So it's not necessarily as important to make sure everybody has a seat all the time because that standing capacity does help facilitate faster boarding and alighting on the Sunrunner. So this is a pie chart to break down our buses by size. You see that roughly 65% of our fleet, or 138 of our buses, are 40-foot buses. We have the 20 trolleys, 44 of the 35-foot buses, and then the smaller portion is the 8 turtle tops in green and the 3 30-foot diesel buses that we have in orange. So the largest portion of our fleet is the 40-foot buses. And so some of the things that we look at as an agency when we're thinking about bus size and purchasing buses, the first one is ridership. So as an agency, we want to make sure that we're not turning away riders at the door when they want to get on the bus. So we have to make sure that we have capacity on the buses that we're putting on these routes. We also wouldn't want a bus to have to turn around in the middle of the day, come back to the yard, get a larger bus and go out because demand has increased for ridership. So we want to generally run the largest bus that we would need on a route to make sure that we have the capacity. There's also infrastructure constraints. There could be a route that may have some really sharp turns or runs on narrow roads or through a denser, slower downtown area. We would certainly want to run smaller buses that could make those turns or that are easier to navigate for the drivers. We also, as I kind of alluded to in ridership, we want to plan for peak service for our peak ridership. So I live on the west side of St. Pete, and when I'm walking my dog, if I'm walking her at about 5 in the morning on Central Avenue, those 4 lanes are empty. But if I'm home at 6 p.m. and I'm walking my dog, that road is full. So in the same way that the lack of demand at 5 in the morning doesn't indicate that there's never any demand on Central Avenue for those 4 lanes, whenever we see a bus that only has a few people on it, that doesn't mean there's never a demand for a larger bus or for higher ridership. We also know that different buses have different maintenance requirements. So we look at useful life, the miles those buses can travel, and the turtle tops typically have a much shorter useful life and can travel less miles than the 30, 35, and 40-foot Gilligs. There also can be grant requirements into where we run these buses depending on how they were purchased. So currently, with our new buses that we're buying, we have to ensure that we're kind of spreading those evenly throughout the county because we couldn't target, say, a wealthy neighborhood to only deploy our newest buses and the lower income neighborhoods for our oldest buses. We wouldn't be allowed to do that as an agency. And so further, we do what is called a max load analysis for the routes in our system. And that means we're looking at the maximum number of people that were on a bus on a route at any given point. I did this analysis for fiscal year 24. And so what you see in this graph here, along the bottom axis, we have every route listed. And then the numbers above that is the maximum load, the maximum number of people that were on those routes on a single bus at any given point throughout fiscal year 24. You see a few lines as kind of breakpoints in this graph. The top green line is 38. We chose that because that's the maximum seating capacity of a 40-foot bus. And any bus above that, which are highlighted in green, we would always want to ensure that we have a 40-foot bus on those routes to meet that peak capacity. The second cutoff that we chose is 30. That's because 30, whether you're on a 30, 35, or a 40-foot bus, 30 is going to be pretty crowded. Varying degrees of crowded depending on the bus size, but it's still pretty crowded no matter which bus you're on. Those routes are highlighted in blue. And then routes that never at any point through fiscal year 24 exceeded a load of 30 are highlighted in orange. So about 25% of our routes exceeded a max load of 38 and would certainly require a 40-foot bus to run. While there are more routes that never exceeded 30, these 11 routes take up about 60% of our bus fleet, these 11 routes in green. When we're talking about Route 52, it takes 15 buses to run Route 52 at peak service. If you look at Route 22, Route 5, Route 812, Route 32, 22 takes 2 buses, Route 5 takes 2 buses, 812 is 2 buses, 32 is 1 bus. That's 7 buses. We could run roughly our bottom 10 routes with just the 15 buses from Route 52. Route 18 requires 12 buses to run at peak. The 20 dedicated buses for the summer. So while a majority of our fleet is dedicated to the 40-foot buses that are running those really high capacity routes, that's because that's where we have the most trips and the most ridership. So the fleet portion of 40-foot buses is larger, but that is a function of trying to meet our demand on these routes mostly. And so, just to highlight real quick, you see a max load of 76 on the Sunrunner. I know that seems kind of absurd. I can personally vouch, I've stuffed into the Sunrunner after a Rays game and then came to work and pulled the report and it was in the 70s. So it's real. And we have some pictures of those crowded buses. This was the Sunrunner at Pride. This is our manager of capital projects, BJ Gavin, riding the Sunrunner on a nice packed bus. That's me on the Sunrunner on a nice packed bus. So we really see some crazy loads on the Sunrunner after special events in downtown St. Petersburg, after Rays game and things like that. So I just wanted to point out why you would see 76, because I know that might look kind of absurd. So we also look at the cost. These prices for the diesel buses, they are from Jacksonville Transit Authority's most recent bus purchase. We didn't include electric prices because they didn't purchase electric buses. They purchased CNG buses, so it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison for us. But the cost differential between the 30 and the 40-foot diesels is pretty minimal, and it mostly comes down to operating costs for us, what we're paying the driver. That is typically our largest expense when we're running buses. But we also look at the useful life and the reliability. Whenever we're talking about the turtle top buses specifically, we know those have a shorter useful life. They're typically off the road more. Things like the wheelchair ramp break more often on those buses. So like we said, different buses may have different maintenance requirements and different issues. So again, to highlight some of the trade-offs, we talked about the capacity. We would want to run the largest bus that we would need on a route at any given time. Operating costs, so for us, the main cost is the driver in the seat of the bus, not necessarily the capital cost for the bus. And obviously, they need to have a right-sized, diverse fleet to make sure that we have enough of the large buses and enough of the shorter buses to best serve the needs of the county and the riders. The reliability and the useful life, though, is something that I want to hit on again with the turtle tops, and the low floor availability. So you see in the turtle top over here, they have about 3 stairs that riders have to climb up to get in these 25-foot buses, and the wheelchair loading is off of the vehicle. So whenever we are boarding a mobility impaired passenger or alighting them, the driver has to stop the vehicle, get out, deploy the wheelchair ramp, load the rider in, bring them on the vehicle, get back on the vehicle, ensure the rider's strapped in, and then go on about their trip to the next stop and maybe do it again. One issue, though, is that our maintenance really does not like those wheelchair ramps on the turtle tops because they break all the time. And when those break, we have to turn away every mobility impaired rider or every wheelchair rider at the door because the bus can't pick them up. So that low floor availability that you see on the Sunrunner here that really allows for that fast, easy boarding, that's really quick on the Sunrunner because they have those level stations. But even off the Sunrunner, our buses can kind of drop a little bit and deploy that wheelchair ramp. And on our regular Gilligs, even if the wheelchair ramp is broken, the driver can manually deploy that wheelchair ramp if they have to. They can't do that on the turtle tops. So for our next steps, I want to bring to your attention that those load numbers are likely going to change with the Connected Community Bus Network that will be going to the board in March. Based on the board's vote, if that is implemented, these routes will change, the demand will likely change. And so we will be bringing an analysis after the bus plan is implemented back to committees just for information. And also, we would be doing this same type of load analysis in conjunction with our bus purchase recommendations in the future. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Devin. Does anybody have any questions for him?
I have 20.
Moving on.
Well, I really love this conversation. So it appears that, how many total routes are there? 40?
44.
44. So 18 are the low ridership down here at the end.
Yeah.
So 18 out of 44, what, 40%? 40% roughly? Of the system ridership is the lower ridership, which I think a lot of times those are, well, I could be speaking wrong, that those might be feeding the other routes. Is that true?
Yes, ma'am. You're very
Okay,
correct.
so, a couple questions. What is the cost of an electric Sunrunner?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can get that for you.
It's about 1.6, isn't it?
Well, the Sunrunners are hybrid. Abhishek, do you know what we pay for this?
The Sunrunner was 800,000.
800,000. But how much then is a 40-foot electric?
Like 1.1?
Yeah, 40-foot electric is about 1.1.
1.1? So you talk about the smaller buses not having the life, but you could buy 3 of them.
Right.
For the cost. And I'm very much in favor of seeing, in order to, I've done a lot of thinking about this, which is very scary, isn't it? And but in order to get our fare box recovery up, we need to get our expenses down. That's one way to get the fare box recovery to recover. Because I know years ago, it was like 30%, wasn't it, Brad?
I don't know if we were, it was north of 15, yeah.
I think it
Maybe
was higher
20.
than that. Back 10 years ago or so, or more. So we're now at what?
No,
6?
like 6 or 7.
6 or 7. So we keep spending, and I don't mean to be a troublemaker. It's just business. And I personally think that we should be putting smaller buses on all, you said you only have 12 small buses?
We have three 30-foot diesels and eight of the 25-foot turtle tops, and then 44.
How many turtle tops?
8.
8. And we have 18 routes. Now, of those 18 routes, how many buses in total does that represent?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'll get you that number.
It's not one.
No, it's certainly not one. It's about 15% of our bus fleet for those bottom routes, 15 to 20% of our bus fleet.
So, and that's where we do put the smaller buses, right?
Typically, yes, the 30, 35.
I know, but it's
buses.
not handling all of those 18
Correct.
routes. You can't do that with 8 buses. So I would just like to kind of introduce the idea, and maybe that's not well spoken, to be reducing our expenses, attempting to raise our fare box recovery by implementing smaller buses on the low ridership routes. Maybe we have to shop around for another company that has better wheelchair lifts.
Yeah.
Seems like that's part of the next step, is not load analysis in conjunction with the bus purchase recommendation. I can speak of these turtle tops. I mean, I'm kind of in that industry, and every dealership I go in has got a lot of turtle tops in for maintenance because they're used so often. They don't require as much maintenance and service, or they require much more maintenance and service than a regular bus.
But they're much less expensive.
Depends on how you look at it.
And on the electrics, you gotta have a charging station to pair.
Yeah, well, I'm not suggesting everything should be electric. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
there's a reason why they've got these smaller buses, versus the expensive ones.
Yeah.
I look forward to what they recommend and the purchase recommendations moving forward.
Well, it's great to have your experience, Tom.
Yeah, well, it's not so much in the transport industry, it's just in the back end of the vehicle industry. I sell the bodies in the back end, so very familiar with what goes on in these passenger vans. They typically spend a lot more time in the shop than, as you mentioned, for various reasons. It could be mechanical, it could be, most of, I guess you're using E450 cutaways on these for the turtle tops?
I don't know off the top of my head.
We've had cutaways in our fleet. That one picture he showed of the wheelchair lift being put, that was I would call that, that's different than a turtle top. That's a cutaway right there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
That's what like
definitely a cutaway.
paratransit uses. But Henry, our maintenance director, spec'd out this turtle top to be like the most like heavy duty, tough, small bus I've ever seen. You know, with like a fancy air conditioner that doesn't break and all that. There's not one maintenance director I've ever heard in my life that wants ever to get one of these vehicles because they're just a nightmare to keep working. But that's what they love the Gillies because the Gillies are more expensive, but they're tanks.
What Gillig are you talking about, the 30?
The 30, yeah. They're just a heavy duty bus is built a lot, and all the components, the air conditioner and all the other parts of a bus.
So the
Are
Gillig
more
30, the Gillig 30 is how much?
713.
Yeah. And the other one was how much? The small turtle tops, how much are they?
Well, they're like 200 and 250 maybe
Okay.
or so, and then but they only last a third as long, so they're about the same as far as life. You get like 3
Well,
versus
thank
3.
you. Thank you.
So it's a trade-off, and I know the customers really like the low floor. It's better for, of course, as Devin's talking about wheelchairs, but it's better for everybody
Yeah.
to than climbing the stairs.
So it's your opinion that the 713 is far more cost effective?
I believe that the the 30-foot, well, it doesn't have to be Gillig. It could be a small 30-foot heavy-duty bus, which is the Gilligs, is maybe a little bit more cost-effective over the life of
Okay.
it than getting the sort of cutaway ones like the body-on chassis vehicles like that.
Sure.
But I think we do need both in our fleet. I mean, I know Mayor Siraki and I, we just were in Tallahassee and we talked to Representative Cheney and the legislator there, and they were very interested in making sure we had a fleet of small buses for, some neighborhoods just shouldn't have a big bus going through them in Pinellas County. So we're always gonna have some of that. I do think we can, as Devin said, once the community bus plan kind of shakes out and sees where the ridership goes, but we should increase our fleet somewhat on the smaller end, on the smaller size of vehicles. I think that's definitely warranted.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thank you.
Max?
Yeah, I like this conversation too. I kind of obsess over efficiencies sometimes, and so it's fascinating. Since I'm new here, tell me, when we talk about fare box recovery, does numerator go on top and denominators on the bottom? Is that denominator, whichever number's on the bottom, is that our total operating expenses? So to clarify, if we acquired a bus through a grant, is that expense factored into the fare box recovery, or is that sort of money that came from elsewhere?
It's actually not in that equation, and that's sort of the other reason you don't see a lot of the smaller turtle tops in transit systems is because, by and large, our buses are paid for by federal grants in the capital program, and the operating cost of the bus driver is the same. And the fuel is about the same, and the maintenance is higher. The operating cost of maintaining the smaller, cheaper vehicles is more, and that does not get paid for by grants. That gets paid for by our property tax. So we try to minimize that as much as we can. That's the other sort of reason why we tend to, it's not in that equation.
Got it. So the Sunrunner hasn't diluted that. Having an expensive bus doesn't necessarily dilute that fare box recovery number, it sounds like.
True. I mean, I think you can compute it by putting even our capital program in the denominator. That's not normally done, but yeah, it's just how you want to calculate it.
However, federal grants are still tax dollars.
Sure, certainly. Good point. Yeah.
Anybody else? Thank you, Devin, appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Next up, Julie Lucas, our Director of Accounting, will walk us through the monthly fund numbers.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Lucas, Director of Accounting. You've got November's financials in front of you. If we look at the month of November, we finished with a $12.9 million net surplus, which was $3 million favorable to our budgeted surplus. Revenue is $2.1 million favorable to budget, driven by property taxes and state grants. Expenses are $852,000 favorable to budget, driven by salary expense and fringe benefit expense. If we turn to the year-to-date November, we finished with a $5.7 million net surplus, which was $2.7 million favorable to the budgeted surplus. Revenue is $1.3 million favorable to budget, with property tax driving that. And expenses are $1.3 favorable to budget, with almost all categories driving it, with just some low dollar small exceptions. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Anybody? Thank you, Julie, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, Debbie,
Well, good morning.
CFO, PSD contract report.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone, and congratulations on becoming chair.
Thank you.
I'm sure Mayor Sreki will tell you it's a fun position. And so we have the contracts report. This is a report that we produce every quarter, and we have over time added information in. We've changed it a little bit. So I always welcome input on this. The way the report is structured is set up by contract value, which is your second column from the right-hand side, going from the highest to the lowest. I have this, of course, set up on my end in an Excel spreadsheet, so I can always take a look at it on a basis with David and say, here are the contracts that are expiring. Let's take a look at those. So for each one of the columns on here, we can take a look at it in any way possible. We put in maybe a couple years ago an anticipated average annual spend, just to kind of give us an idea of where we are spending our money on these items. But I will take any questions on this report and of course any suggestions that might be of interest to you as we go forward.
Thank you, Debbie, appreciate that. I have a quick question before I open to others. Who is Catherine Woods?
She is the artist for the Sunrunner.
Okay. That's the only one that jumped out to me because it didn't have a company name tagged to it. I'm like, okay, how do I get on this list? Does anybody else have any questions for Debbie?
Very organized, thank you.
Very. Okay. Seeing no questions, we'll move on.
Mr. Chair, Debbie, could you inform the new chair of the Finance Committee and the rest of the Finance Committee of an upcoming fun exercise for them?
Yes. Oh, I have got some work for all of you.
That close to a clean getaway.
It has been 5 years since we had the contract with our current provider for audit services, our outside audit firm. So we are going out for a solicitation for audit services, and I'm deputizing all of you into the evaluation committee. What we are going to do is we have selected 3 people from outside PSTA, and this is pursuant to a statute that we have where our new chair will be leading the evaluation committee, so thank you for that. Last time, I think we got about 10 proposals in. And what the initial committee did was narrow it down to the competitive range and brought the final several, 2 or 3, to all of you. So you'll be getting trained on how to do evaluations for a procurement. You will be making the ultimate selection. Julie and I are not allowed to make any decisions related to this to have complete independence. We will be advisors on the committee. So if you've got any questions or we see something that we want to bring to your attention, we can do that. And I think since I've been here, I've had a different audit firm every 5 years. You don't have to have it that way, but it's worked out that way. Should we ever select along life's way the same audit firm, they are required by law to change partners so that we, again, keep that open, honest independence in the review of our financials.
It's a state requirement that governing bodies have a committee of board members to select the auditor.
Yeah, we just went through that in my city. So.
Yeah, we just went through that in Dunedin too, and I was on that committee, so I
Seasoned
personally
veteran.
am very excited about this.
So when I was chair, we did the CPA, remember?
Yeah,
We did
yeah.
that when I first became chairman of the finance committee. That was a
Been
great
that
learning
long,
experience, I love that. So you guys are in for a treat.
Looking
We're in
forward
for
to
a
it.
treat.
Yes, you are.
Excuse me. Does any committee member have any other business before the committee? Seeing none, we are adjourned, and our next meeting is February 19th at 9 a.m. Thank you, everybody.
Great job, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
And FYI, unfortunately, the proposed launch of the Clearwater Ferry, which was supposed to happen tomorrow, has been delayed due to weather.
The 31st, right? 2:30?
To the 31st, to next Friday.
2 o'clock, right? 2 or 2:30?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock, yes.